The heat wave is back again. Is it a heat wave? If it feels like it's basically constant with a few days in between. And it's so hot that I haven't even written a proper introduction for this week's podcast. It's the Respec Ramblings podcast with me, Alex Donaldson, and joined by Mr. Tom Orry once again. How you doing, dude?
All right, it is hot. I had to do a ridiculous. Before we started recording this, I thought my son needs a haircut. We're on holiday next week, so I thought, well, my wife said he's got to get a haircut today. So I was like, fine, I'll do it before I start working. I'll get out early. Had to walk miles to get there because there's this one place he goes to, and it has to be this one particular woman that cuts his hair. Get there, bang on, the door's opening. Is this lady in today? No, she's not in. So just traipse around a mile and a half just for a bit of heat. That was all we got out of it. And I had to buy them some stuff from the newsagent because they were whinging.
I had a man come to repair a chip in the car windscreen, which is in itself a disaster because I had a whole new windscreen because of a crack.
This is the new windscreen that's been cracked.
Yeah, and the first were chipped, and the first trip I did down the M5 with my brand new shiny beautiful windscreen that thankfully my insurance paid for it, but had the insurance not paid for it would have been thousands of pounds. And first trip down the M5, great big stone, pop, and now I've got a lovely new chip that even after repair is going to be a little bit visible. And I don't even know what to say to it other than I know what. Everything in our country is falling apart. The roads are crumbling to pieces. And so 1 month a brand new windscreen lasted. It's hideous, but hey-ho. As if the chaos in the world of video games wasn't enough, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit this week, and some good stuff as well. Not all bad, although it does feel like at the minute we're in a period of time for video games where every week we've got at least one thing that is suboptimal to discuss. But I wanted to talk to you about you've been doing a fair amount of you did a good amount of research on gaming on a budget, and that sort of that sort of coincided with an article I wrote and a video version as well. If you're watching this, there's a video version of this article on the channel about the Series S and about how I, for a long time, felt like the Series S was actually a really special piece of hardware, even though a lot of developer friends I knew hated it. And you know, I really thought the Series S was gonna be a big deal for playing GTA, and now the prices have gone so ridiculous. You know, it's just so stupidly expensive that you might as well save a little bit longer and get a PS5. I mean, it's weird. It's like because the price difference between the Series S and the PS5 is about the same as it's always been, but I think that price difference becomes a lot less when you're talking about 400 and something pounds than when you're talking about 200 and something.
It's the classic, I'm spending 400, so why not spend 500? It's the classic talking yourself into that little thing, but when it's smaller numbers, everything is just, percentages are bigger, right, when it's smaller. But yeah, Series S, we talked about this a bit last week, right? When they launched that or showed it off, I felt like it was a smart move, right? It felt like a sensible thing. Like I get the arguments from people that feel it caused problems, etc. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But from a development point of view or whatever else, but from a purely like consumer, particularly family oriented point of view, it felt like a sensible thing to have this option for people that didn't want. I mean, even back when the consoles launched, they were 450 quid, right? It wasn't cheap by any means. And having a 250 quid option just made sense. But yeah, it just wasn't, I think, who knows? Like I wonder if Sony had released a budget PS5, would that have flown off the shelves? We will never know, probably, but I think it may have done a lot better.
I spoke to Dringo about this because when I was writing an article, I wanted to check in with, he's got access to all at least the European sales data. And I said to him, how does it split? And he was saying to me, well, initially, it was much more heavily weighted towards the Series S than anyone, including Microsoft, had considered. That didn't mean that the Series S was the majority, but it meant they were selling more Series S's by some way than they anticipated. And I don't think it'd ever be the majority because people generally want the shiny option. It's like with cars. Like if you go and statistically look at it, a company like Ford, let's say, you can see those numbers, and it's quite. They always. It's quite rare for the base model, the cheapest one, the one where they advertise on TV from 23,000. It's quite rare for most brands for that to be the one that sells the most. People usually go at least one step up. And I think that'd be the case here, but I still think they would have sold absolutely loads of a cheaper PS5. And I sort of expect, especially with the idea of this handheld and all that sort of stuff, which we're going to be running at a lower power, maybe we will get that sort of thing with the PS6 from those guys. But it's just a shame the price has just become so ridiculous.
Yeah. But this is why we've been looking at the budget gaming options and stuff. And I've seen a lot of people say, like, I'm just going to sit out the next generation. I'm going to be happy with what I've got. And that's fine. Like, obviously, lots of people listening to this probably have a PC or a console of some sort that they're happy with and can sit on and sit out maybe another 4 or 5 years even until things hopefully get better. But I guess from a point of view of people that are like, looking to get, I don't know, their kid a first console or something, where you used to have loads of options, right? Things were cheaper. This is around the time where the PS5 in that life cycle would be looking at the cheap option because you get it near the end of the life cycle. It's reduced massively from what it would have been at launch, but that's just not happened. So if you've got like an 8-year-old or something, or you're just wanting to get into games, you're like, well, this just looks fucked basically. I'm not spending 500 plus quid on a console that's going to get replaced next year potentially. What are your options? And I mean, PS4 is still, I think, a viable games console in many ways. Like you're not going to get new games, right? Really, I mean, there's the odd game that pops up that still comes out on a PS4 or an Xbox One, and you did get quite a lot of early gen games come on PS4. You can pick up a PS4 for about 70 quid secondhand. So it's, compared to current consoles, dirt cheap. Games, relatively cheap, like 10 quid often for decent games. So I think a PS4 is if you're looking like, my kid wants to get into games, I don't think you can't really go that wrong with a PS4. You could spend 100 quid and get a nice little package together, probably, particularly off eBay or something. I mean, even looking at I looked at the Xbox One X's because that's a really good console. Like the build quality, the overall thing was really well done. Very powerful still compared to some consoles out there. Like it's still not getting the new games, but it runs that generations of games better than anything else. Plus you get a lot of backwards compatibility stuff. You get a lot of the old Xbox games running at higher resolution. And that, again, surprisingly, about not that different to a PS4 in price. Like if you can get one for under 100 easily, games are cheap, etc. Plus, Game Pass has become less of a deal than I guess it used to be. But still, you could, in theory, sit on that for a while. There's still quite a lot of games on that still work on the older generation Xboxes. The tricky part about all this is you're never going to get. There's never a lack of games. Like how many games released on the PS4? A ridiculous amount of games are available, right? Like if you've never played a PS4 or that generation, you could sit on that for years and still have stuff to play. You're not going to run out of games by any means. It's just that are you going to feel that, I guess, the FOMO of the new God of War's come out, I can't play that, etc. I can't play the new Resident Evils, can't play all this other stuff. But I think it depends on who you're buying for. If you've a kid, my daughter's just started playing on the Switch. She's 5, she's seen the old Switch in my office. She's like, that's my Switch now. I'm like, fine, that's your Switch now. And she's just messing around on pretty much a lot of the Nintendo Online stuff. She's playing Mario Kart 64. She's playing Mr. Driller 2 on the Game Boy Advance. There's just a Switch is still a good option. Particularly a Switch Lite, although you've got to be careful with Switch Lites because a lot of the listings for those on eBay are super ropey. They'll have cracks, they'll have smashes in the corners. Clearly they're a kid focused option with a lot of people. So they've been thrown around a bit, but you can get them reasonably cheap, 60 odd quid if you're lucky, often with bundles of games and stuff. And I think if you're looking for like, I don't know, Christmas is coming up or whatever, your kid doesn't, if they're little, they do not care about new stuff. They have no clue what's going on. They just want something, particularly if you've got an older sibling or something, they want to be like them, they want to have their games, they want to play something. Don't spend on a Switch 2 for a 6-year-old or 7-year-old. I don't think it's
Absolutely not.
It's not worth the money.
No.
Get them something cheaper. Get them a Switch Lite. Particularly if their likelihood of playing on a TV is slim, I don't think there's any issue with a Switch Lite. Check it looks decent condition, because obviously you can't just slot new controllers on the side or anything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't plug to TV. But if you know that, I think that's a good option. An original Switch is still under 100 quid. Just look for bundles. I think I came across loads of bundles where people just throw it in the description, but don't make a big deal of it. And they say, oh, it's just got 4 games included. No one sees it because it's not in the headline and stuff. So I think, yeah, last generation is still, it has dropped. I mean, these are old systems now, right? Like, when did the PS4 come out? Like 13 years ago or something now, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So they're old, but still perfectly good. Like, you look at something like, let's say God of War, the first
Yep.
God of War,
Yep.
sort of the Norse one where they kind of redid it all. Still holds up perfectly fine. Like, that's a modern game by all standards, really. That's the kind of experience you get on a PS4 of that generation. And I think for most people, if you particularly haven't played console games in a while, I think that's perfectly fine. If you're like thinking, well, I've played all that, what do I do? I mean, retro stuff is quite complicated. Like, I'm forever almost buying a PS2. Like, so many times I've been like, I've got one in my basket on eBay, 40 game bundle, whatever. I'm like, do I buy it? Do I buy it? And then I'm always like, do I actually play this thing? Because I haven't got an old TV. I haven't got like a way of plugging it in, really. And then I look into it, and even like a single cable to plug it, like a good cable to plug it in properly, it's like 80 quid. And that adds to the cost. And then if you want to go actually like decent beyond that, you're talking hundreds of pounds for like an adapter box thing. You know more about these things than I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a retro stuff. I'm constantly torn to it because there's a load of stuff I missed out playing. I played a lot of stuff, but there's always stuff you miss, right? Particularly on the PS2, and I'm always thinking about the SNES because I never had a SNES really. Like, I bought one years later, and picked up a few games, but there's so many games I never played. I'm always tempted, but then there's always like an extra level of cost that isn't obvious unless you really look into it. I mean, you've got like the proper sort of modern retro consoles, right? But they're a whole other league of cost.
Yeah. Well, the thing about those is they can be quite expensive. Probably the best one at the moment in terms of value. Obviously, there's the analog consoles, which I highly recommend. But the analog is the gaming equivalent of, it's like vinyl records, right? People who are into retro games are like people who are into vinyl records, which means there's different classes. There's like the class of people who buy a cheap record player from Argos, with built-in speakers, and those are the people who've been buying like the Super Nintendo Mini, the Mega Drive Mini. And I bet if I just this is live research, but if I go to Argos and type in the words retro game, lo and behold, some Evercade stuff comes up. That's another good example, is Evercade's. Evercade's got some really reasonably priced stuff. The other end is obviously people who go and buy super, super, super high-end audiovisual AV setups to listen and get the maximum audio benefit out of vinyl. And the gaming equivalent of that is analog stuff. So like the analog 3D, which is the N64, the analog SG, which is the Mega Drive. The problem with these is they are all individual, so they only do one system, and they're all quite expensive. So, they sort of only do one system. You can finesse that, right? But it requires a lot of work. But an analog 3D, for instance, is $270. And then if you're in the UK, you've got to get into the hole for customs as well. The one that's a bit interesting if you are desperate for retro game stuff right now is so there's a console called the Polymega. Now I've talked about Polymega before because they were naughty bastards. They did take an enormous amount of money off people and then took ages to ship. And so I bought a really high-end Polymega bundle, and it was literally like the better part of $1,000.
It's like the one with all the different like plug-in things that changes the
The
system.
modules, yeah.
Yeah.
And they took it. They had that money of mine for 4 years before I physically held a product in my hands, which is not acceptable in my opinion. And they weren't communicating what was going on and stuff either. But they've released a new device called the Polymega Remix.
All right. Yeah,
That's-
I saw this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 150 quid. That requires another machine. But assuming you've got a laptop or a Steam Deck or something like that, it doesn't need to be a powerful machine. What the Polymega Remix does is you plug that into your Steam Deck or your laptop via a USB cable, and then you can put your original PlayStation discs or whatever into that and play them on your PC. So it's and then obviously it takes all the way the Polymega works is just like a base unit. The base unit takes CDs, but then you can slide a piece of it off and clip on modules. So if you clip on the N64 module, that gives you 4 N64 controller ports and an N64 cart slot. And so you can basically use that in tandem to play N64 games on the PC and things like that. Obviously, all that and it's compatible, by the way, NES, Super NES, Mega Drive, TurboGrafx 16, N64, Atari 2600, and 7800. So there's a good number of the modules, but again, you're looking at 150 odd quid for the remix. Then you've got to buy any modules that you want. So say you do want the N64 module, that's another 60 odd quid. Stock is also quite difficult to find at the minute, but that's probably the most interesting one. Other than obviously you can get like those ANEO devices and stuff like that, and that is actually a genuine consideration where those things aren't cheap. But there is if you can find yourself content with older games, with retro games, and maybe playing mods and ROM hacks and things like that, and that becomes your gaming bunker for the period of time that this stupid part shortage and cost madness goes on, then maybe you spend 250, 300 quid on one of those, and you're going to obviously have a much greater library to toy around with than you would if you bought any one of the current consoles.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've got one of the cheaper. Is it an Anbernic? The Anbernic?
Yeah.
But one of those ones that looks like it's the same. They did one that looks like a Game Boy Advance SP, but then it's the wide version of that. So it plays like up to PlayStation quality game, like level games, I think. And it cost me like 50 quid. It's probably gone up now because everything's more expensive. But the problem I have with those is that I end up it's almost like it's the novelty of it is that I just skim through loads of stuff. I'm just testing it out constantly. I'm just testing, does this run? How does this run? I'm going to try this. And I was putting like, same with my Steam Deck. I was trying out all the Model 2 and 3 arcade games on it, right? Just because you can. So I was like, I'll try these constantly. I never play anything properly. Whereas I think if I had this is why I constantly look at PS2s. I think if I had one, I'd be like, I'm playing this game now. I put it in the thing, I'm playing it, and I'm going to actually dedicate time to it. Whereas the handhelds, I find I'm just skipping between stuff. I'm never invested because it's just there. Which it depends on what you're like, right? Maybe you're the kind of person that will be like, yeah, I've got this. I'm going to stick and play 30 hours of Pokemon or whatever. But yeah, I think retro stuff, like I looked into like how expensive 3DS is and stuff, because the 3DS is a good system with a lot of good games, but they're quite expensive still.
3DS is the games are expensive as well. 3DS is a library where, because the emulation isn't 100% reliable in a lot of cases, the cost of certain carts is through the roof.
Yeah. I think that's particularly Nintendo's. This is the other thing with the Switch. Obviously, if you're looking at getting Nintendo games, they still are reasonably expensive, even on the original Switch. Whereas a lot of the games on like the PS4 or the Xbox are dirt cheap now. Like they don't hold their value anywhere near what Nintendo games do. But it depends if you're buying for a child. I mean, a Switch is a great option. It's just the cost overall will probably be greater because some of the games are more expensive. But yeah, like it's a tricky period, right? Like we're probably, I mean, assuming we're still running respec and stuff in the next few years, like there'll be new consoles and they'll probably come out costing like over $1,000, probably. I mean, who knows? And then at that point, like it's hard to be like covering them from a like, is this good? But then also like, is this good enough to be spending upwards of $1,000 on this in the first place? Plus the games, who knows how much they're going to end up costing. It's a very tricky time, like in terms of like excitement around next gen is going to be heavily impacted by just who can actually buy these things.
Well, also it's weird, right? Because the thing about a next gen is, and I think it's the thing about this generation as well. There was an interesting comment on the website from someone on my Xbox piece where they were like, "I think this generation has been like the least essential generation," and that's because we've had so much cross-platform stuff. It's mad. We're 6 years into this generation, and it feels like we've barely had any really big exclusive games. And some of the biggest wins have been stuff that's been Cyberpunk upgraded and things like that. Obviously, there are some great exclusives, and even where there's exclusive is like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is like brilliant, but it's also very much this iterative step on from Final Fantasy VII remake. And yeah, they couldn't have necessarily done that. They couldn't have done that to the quality they did it if they were still on PS4. But you sort of look at it feels more iterative. And I think next generation is going to be even more so for two reasons. One, these consoles are going to be so expensive that there's going to be concern about install base and stuff, and devs aren't going to want to shut out last generation's people. So a really good example is, like I just mentioned, Cyberpunk. CD Projekt making Cyberpunk 2. They've obviously got The Witcher 4 first, so they're not going to be talking about Cyberpunk 2 for a while. I think in the past, that game would have targeted the next generation exclusively. Now, I would assume it's all but certain that it will be on the current gen and then significantly enhanced on the next gen. And so we're heading towards this, and that's where around the time they released the Xbox Series S and X, someone at Xbox, not on the record, but just sort of in a casual conversation, sort of intimated to me, they were like, well, one of the things we're thinking about with this naming, because I was saying the name sucks, is that the generation structure might be going away and it might go over to something more like a phone, where maybe not every single year you have a hardware revision in games, but if you think about it, if you've still got a 5-year-old iPhone, that is still basically a current iPhone. And then there comes a point when your iPhone hits a certain age and they begin to withdraw support for updates and things like that. And at that point, you've got to go out and get a new one. And I could see a world in which, you get a hardware refresh every 2 years, and actually the hardware does get more powerful over time. But it's I don't know. It is a mess, and it's hard to. I thought your article was really good at sort of actually breaking down some practicalities of how you can get into playing games. I think we could all do better to realize that there's a very rich, beautiful history of games to be mined, and you don't necessarily have to spend loads of money to enjoy games.
I think the Nintendo Switch Online retro offering is actually surprisingly good. Like it's a slow build, right? They've been building that up for quite a while, but you look at it now and there's a lot of stuff on there and it's quite varied. Like there's a stuff on there that you wouldn't think is on there. There's stuff that you would think, obviously some of the bigger Nintendo stuff's there, like Zelda's, Mario, etc. But there's other stuff that you might think, well, I didn't expect that to be there if you weren't paying attention. So I think that's worth looking. And Nintendo Switch Online, and then obviously there's the more expensive option, but you get a lot of would you get like the pre GameCube stuff is all on the basic membership, is it? I think, and there's a lot there that you can spend a lot of time in without spending that much money, and that probably is the cheapest way of going about playing some of those things if you don't want to spend out on real hardware and everything else. But yeah, like I think you could get away with buying an old console and picking out the games that you you want for years and you'd be fine. It's just, I think the big thing for publishers is going to be, and particularly the platform holders, is what are they going to put on these systems that make you want to spend the money? Because we've had system sellers have always been a thing. They were less so this generation, I think. But I think if you're going to like whatever the next Xbox, PlayStation is, like it'd be interesting to see how they sell them to people, because like we've got the fast loading, we've got the 4K, we've got games that look about as good as people probably want them to look in many ways. So what is going to be like, I don't know what Sony's going to launch their next system with, but say it's got like a new Horizon game or something, who knows? What's it going to offer that you can't get on the PS5? I think that'll be an interesting thing, because like it's for lots of people just saying, oh, it's got better image scaling or image reproduction, whatever, AI image reproduction like DLSS version, PSSR, whatever. That isn't going to sell a console to most people. So it'd be interesting to see what they say about these things.
Yeah, it's also unpredictable, because the problem is, we just don't know where things are going to land in 18 months. We don't really know where things are going to land in terms of components and stuff in 2 months. There's never been a less stable time, but that's a great reason to revisit old games. And also, it's naughty, but the state of emulation has never been better. There's a lot of vibe coded BS ports and stuff showing up, admittedly, but all things like those N64 decomps. I was playing the decomp of Banjo-Kazooie the other day on PC. Great, like widescreen and looks gorgeous, and obviously it's running natively and running brilliantly. That's the sort of thing you have to ask yourself. Like, if you're the sort of person who doesn't own a Switch 2 and we haven't seen it, right? But if you're the sort of person who doesn't own a Switch 2, but is absolutely like chomping at the bit to buy one for Ocarina of Time remake, but money's tight, that PC decomp's there and it's pretty damn good, and there's some pretty damn good mods and options. Nintendo might not necessarily like it, but tough times call for tough measures, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a good article. I highly recommend that folks check it out. Just especially if you're thinking about what your path is going to be for having some affordable video games, video game action. It's definitely got some interesting suggestions, for sure. What else this week? I played a bunch of Star Wars Zero Company. There is a preview on the site, but I figure it doesn't hurt to touch on it a little bit here. It's an interesting one because this is a bunch of ex-Firaxis guys who worked on XCOM and worked on Midnight Suns, and they literally left there and said, we want to make that sort of game again, more XCOM than Midnight Suns. And they pitched Lucas Games rather, and they got the license, and they've made a Star Wars game set in the Clone Wars era, where it's small squad based combat stuff. And if you like those sorts of games, it's a real good version of those sorts of games. I don't know,
does it feel, I mean, XCOM, I had a period where I got into, I think the first, when they rebooted XCOM, the first one that was like on, was it PS3 generation or was it PS4? I can't remember. But that first one that hit consoles, so I'd moved away a bit from PC gaming by that point, so it worked well on console. I got into it a bit, but I just found it became too much. Like, I was a bit more casual. Like, I got on better with Gears Tactics, surprisingly. Like, I found that more, like, I just play a bit more casually, I suppose. But I liked the XCOM sort of that reboot. Is it like, it's going to sound harsh, but is it essentially like a reskin of that? Or are they doing anything that makes it stand out from those games?
So what I'd say is XCOM can be pretty brutal. And even if you do things like turn off permanent death and stuff like that, it can still be pretty brutal. That's by design. They've tried to retain that, but they've definitely made a lot of steps. There's a lot of allowances and contrivances to sort of make sure this can appeal to a broader audience, i.e., people who are buying this because it's a Star Wars game, not because it's a game from the people who made XCOM. So, for instance, I'll do the smaller things first and then go on to the bigger thing. So, smaller things like permanent death. You can toggle that on or off, but even if you have it on, the way it works is when a character gets downed, that's like a strike and they get a wound. And the wound will forever affect their combat ability and stuff like that, but they live. Then they get a second wound. That will also reduce their combat ability. If you get a third wound on that same character, then they're dead. And so you can see there that's an allowance for, rather than, oh my God, I didn't see an enemy over there. One shot, one kill. That's it. You've lost that character. You've been training for 10 hours. There's been allowances made. I would say it's broadly more accessible. It's not grid-based, so the movement feels a bit more fluid. But the bigger thing actually is the stuff surrounding the combat, because the combat does still feel like XCOM. You're doing Overwatch, by which I mean the mode you set characters in, where if something moves in their line of sight, they shoot at it. You're doing Overwatch, you're taking cover, you're shooting at stuff while having a percentage come up telling you how likely it is that shot's going to hit. And yes, you can have a shot hit. One of the first things that happened to me in the game was an achievement popped for like having a shot that had like a 90+% chance of hitting miss. I was like, great, still XCOM. But the other thing they've done is, outside of all that combat, it's sort of Mass Effect-y. So you create a character who's called Hawks, and Hawks is like, when I say create a character, it's in that Commander Shepard thing. So you choose if you want the male voice or the female voice, but then you get to choose their race and how they look and their clothes and stuff like that, and a little bit of their background. And then in between missions, you have a hub base that you're using, and that is actually, you walk around it, you actively use that base. It's very, very much like the Normandy from Mass Effect. You get to know these characters, which is great, because with that combines with the element of the permanent death to make for some real jeopardy, because you actually begin to give a shit about these guys. And they even use some of that third person stuff in between in the combat missions. So like, you imagine an encounter ends and it zooms from the isometric top-downy view in, so you're over the shoulder of your character, and then you can walk around a little bit, and then when you hit a zone where there's going to be more combat, then it zooms back out. And I was like, that's really interesting, because it makes it feel more like a Star Wars character action game in between the moment to moment. So I think it seems like it stands a pretty good chance of like splitting the difference, threading that needle.
Does it have? I'm not big on Star Wars, I won't lie. But you said this is Clone Wars. If you're like, I'm going to say this appearing in a gang, that's like a cartoon, right? Or an animated thing. Are there people that people will recognize from that in this, or is it all new people?
I obviously haven't seen all of it, but what I can, I've seen a limited previous slice, but what I can say is it's that Star Wars expanded universe thing of, a lot of this is dealing with new characters who are operating around the fringes of the things we know about, but you are going to see people and places that you know. So like the actually a really good example is the main base that you are returning to time and time again is on a planet from Rogue One that appears in that movie. And also something they have announced and talked about is Anakin Skywalker appears in the game and is in it and plays a role.
Jar Jar in it? Is Jar Jar in it?
I mean, we will see. He's around and alive in that period. So, but it's actually a funny one. The setting is interesting, because one of the things about the XCOM formula is, I feel an inherent part of that formula is this sort of insurmountable odds thing. It's one of the things that really made XCOM 2 better than XCOM 1. So if you don't know that series, the way that sort of pans out is XCOM 1 is about an alien invasion, and XCOM is trying to fight off the invasion. And XCOM 1 is really difficult. And so when they came to make XCOM 2, even though that game has a good ending where you've repelled the aliens and destroyed the mother brain, whatever, they made a really clever decision with XCOM 2 where they decided they were going to pick XCOM 2 up from a bad ending of XCOM 1. They decided they were going to pick up from a failed run of XCOM 1. So the aliens have then taken over the planet, and in XCOM 2, you're operating an insurgency. The opening of the game is the new insurgent ragtag XCOM rescuing the commander, your character, who had been captured at the end of the canonical end of XCOM 1. And from there, you've sort of, the point is you've never got hardcore help, you know? You've always got your back against the wall. You're always outnumbered. You're always outgunned. You're sending in strike forces of 5 or 6 soldiers to do these really vital missions because that's all you can field. That feels weirdly less compatible with the Clone Wars era where everything's on the line. And so Zero Company is sort of put forward as a mercenary group. Hawks is ex-proper army, ex-whatever, not separatists, those are the bad guys, ex-Republic army. So you are put forward as a mercenary group, and the idea is you are small and you are ragtag. But actually, I'm quite intrigued by their decision to set it in this bit of Star Wars, because as I played it, I couldn't help but think that against all odds, small teams element feels like it would have made more sense with the Rebellion. Like, but I digress. You know, and I don't know where the game's going. Maybe they'll have a time skip. I doubt it, though. And to be fair to them, the Clone War era does give them more interesting enemy stuff they can do because they've got all the droids to draw from and stuff like that. It also means you can have a few Jedi here and there. I get the impression you won't have any Jedi in your permanent squad, but maybe you'll have them coming and going as part of story events, and so you can control them temporarily. But yeah, I mean, there's enough there, I think, to satisfy people. And I'm not very up on my Clone Wars, but I imagine someone who maybe has watched all of the shows and all that sort of stuff and knows that era of Star Wars better than I do, might be noticing more stuff than I am. But I noticed a fair share of bits and bobs.
Cool. It's out soon, right? Like a couple of weeks or something, is it?
Yeah, I think it's the 27th off the top of my head. It's definitely the end of the month. But I did have one other element of it that I wanted to briefly talk about, which is I just had a funny reaction to this, and it was very similar to the reaction I had to Marvel's Midnight Suns, actually, which was from Firaxis, that some of these guys worked on. Which was, I really enjoyed it. I think it's really good. I think it's, you know, a worthwhile successor to all the mechanics and stuff that were expressed in XCOM that made that so popular. But, and it's quite a big but, actually, and I don't know if I'm just a weirdo for this, but I spent the whole time that I was playing it, much as I did with Midnight Suns, thinking to myself, this is really good, but I sort of just wish they'd made this was just XCOM 3. And I don't think it's necessarily about my loyalty to that specific franchise. I think it's about what has been created with XCOM 3 is such a perfect fit for this formula. And when you try to retrofit that formula to something else, even if it's a very good fit, as Star Wars is, it doesn't feel quite as perfect as the IP that was tailor-built for it. And so that's a funny, and I mean, hopefully this doesn't have a similar fate to Midnight Suns, because it just didn't cut through in that way. And it had a really, really weird thing going on where it simultaneously didn't cut through with Marvel fans, I think because it was this nitty-gritty card-based strategy game, but it also didn't cut through with XCOM fans because the stuff they'd done mechanically to make it more Marvel made it less XCOM, and it made it less of what those people wanted. This admittedly is closer to XCOM. I think the IPs are more closely aligned, but nevertheless, that's a niggling thing that's itched around at the back of my brain since I played it. But it is good. Obviously, there is the element of this will be an interesting test also for the reaction to the EA buyout, because this will be EA's first major release since being bought out and being owned by, you know, Saudi interests, Donald Trump's son-in-law, etc., etc. So we'll see if they lose much in terms of public cut through as a result of that. But yeah, I've got I've got time for it. Decent.
Yeah, that's good.
One other little bit of news I wanted to touch on this week, just so people don't lose out and don't miss out, to flag it to everyone, is it's being announced that Pokémon Bank will stop working on February the 26th, 2027. It's a funny date to do it because that is, I think that's Pokemon Day, or it's right around Pokemon Day, i.e. the day the games first came out that are a celebration. So it's weird that they're going, hey, we're shutting this thing right around their big anniversary celebration that they do every year. But this is, a relatively big deal. But also, I think Nintendo and the Pokemon Company and Game Freak and everyone involved really deserves a big pat on the back because this is a shutdown done right. They've announced it with plenty of notice in the sense that they already announced before that this was going. And they've now confirmed the date that it's going, and they've done so a good, 6 months in advance. Basically, Pokemon Bank had connectivity all the way back to games released in 2003. So you could use this to get Pokemon off really old games. And I think because of the transfer, I'm not a total expert on this, but I think because of the transferability, because you could transfer up through the generations, I'm pretty sure you could take a Pokemon from a Game Boy original all the way to a game that was compatible with this, then into this, and then that, so you could bring a character, a Pokemon from Red all the way into XY, whatever, or into Sword Shield, whatever. Obviously, that's the main difference, is that this has already been replaced by Pokemon Home, and Pokemon Home is compatible with all the current stuff, so Go and all the current console games, all the rest. I'm pretty sure it's compatible with Champions to some degree. It's compatible with all the current Pokemon stuff, Pokemon Home. But if you've got any creatures trapped on older games, February the 26th obviously is sort of your deadline to get them into Bank and then get them back off Bank onto something that's compatible with Home. Bit convoluted, but I think they also deserve credit for like the way they've done it.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't bother me at all because I've never been bothered about Pokemon, but I do like the idea of a Pokemon Bank, like an actual banking establishment run by Pokemon, like all the different Pokemon at the counters, someone helping elderly people to the front of the queue. That could be like Psyduck or something, I don't know.
Psyduck wouldn't be helping people because Psyduck would be too confused and stressed.
That goes perfectly with elderly people. That'd be absolute chaos. But yeah, this is like one of those things where it's like people might be a bit miffed by it, but actually, like they've done their bit to make this a thing for a long time, right? And it's got to move on at some point to whatever the next thing is. So I think hopefully most people will be okay with it.
You maybe look up if there's any banks canonically in the Pokemon universe. There is a bank run by Persian, which obviously is the evolution of Meowth, which makes sense because Meowth does have a coin on its head. That's it. That's in the Pokemon Rescue Team games though, where you actually play as Pokemon. So who knows how the humans deal with their money? Pokemon, a world in which there are no banks, but there are casinos, which is my sort of place.
Just hoarding it under the mattress.
Yeah, or like, is there a Pokemon you could feed? Pelipper. They put them all in you could put all your money in the pouch it's got in its. Is that Pelipper? Is Pelipper the small one? Pelipper is the one with the the Pelipper with the big neck.
Something like a Pez dispenser.
Yeah, and then when you want some money, you reach into its neck and take out, a 50 Poké-Dollar note or whatever. Anyway, I thought that's pretty cool the way they've approached that, and they've these shutdowns are inevitable to some degree, and obviously you've got the Stop Killing Games petition making a big argument for stopping things like this from being closed, but they've gone about it about as right as you possibly could, which is fair enough. But if you want to get any old Pokemon off old games, consider this your warning. Obviously, there is now going to be new ways, however, to get old Pokemon. we've got the versions of Fire Red and Leaf Green on Nintendo Switch, and they are going to be made compatible with Pokemon Home right around the time that this closes. So that will enable you then to get Gen 1 Pokemon. And we have to assume that a Gen 2 re-release is coming, and Gen 3, and eventually you'll have all the Pokemon games on the Switch. That was something that someone said to me in the run-up to Switch 2, someone who works at Nintendo. They were like, yeah, our goal for this generation is to try and have all of every single entry in the main line of all of our major franchises playable on the Switch 2 by the end of the generation. So whether that's through, we talked about it a lot this episode, Nintendo Switch Online, whether that's through re-releases like they've done with Pokemon, the idea is they want to have every single mainline Mario game, which they're got to be pretty close to that on Switch 2 now, because we've had Mario Sunshine hit NSO this week or last week. So what's missing?
I don't know. They've got all the. I'm pretty sure I saw the GBA ones are on there. I assume I haven't looked at the NES and SNES section, but I assume they've got.
Well, I just mean the
most.
mainline Mario games. So Super Mario Brothers, obviously on NSO. Lost Levels on NSO. 2, 3 on NSO. Land must be, right? World, yes, on NSO. Land 2 must be. 64 is. Sunshine is. Galaxy obviously has had a port. Galaxy 2 has had a port. So I suppose it's just those handheld ones. New Super Mario Brothers. 3D Land. Well, there was 3D Land.
3D Land. As in, which one's 3D Land? Is that the 3DS
was the
one?
3DS one, yeah.
So is that not on anything? Was that
No, because they obviously did 3D World, didn't they? But that wasn't the port. That was all
no. So yeah, maybe that is.
But that's the point. So basically, they're almost there, apart from the DS games. And New Super Mario Bros. Wii, I guess. So yeah, like that goes to show. And if they can do that for the whole, for all those franchises, the same for Zelda, right? Like all the old Zeldas are on there. The only stuff that's missing, I guess, now is the GameCube, Wii era, which Wind Waker's already on NSO, isn't it? So it's just Twilight Princess now. Yeah. It's a good strategy. It comes back to, this has been the theme of this episode, right? Of Nintendo Switch Online slaps, and actually the way in which Nintendo is approaching their back catalog is really awesome. It sort of puts like Sony, and it puts Sony especially to shame. Like Microsoft at least has a pretty good. In fact, to be fair to Microsoft, we've only just this month had original Xbox games showing up on PC in emulated form. So you've got to give them credit for that. But it puts Sony to shame with the way they sort of sell really bare bones emulated versions of PlayStation 1 games, some PS2 games, and not much else. And it's also a funny, weird thing of all the Game Pass talk. The best subscription service in gaming in many ways is Nintendo's retro thing, which just comes as part of your online. So
yeah, it's very good.
Oh dear. Some last other bits, just to point out some stuff that's on the website. Obviously, there's, as previously mentioned, there's Tom's gaming on a budget article. There's my thing talking about the Series S, which is also on YouTube. There's Dead Rising turned 20 years old last week, which makes me feel ancient. I wrote a little love letter to that, talking about how much I bloody love that game. There is a new episode of Elden Ring where Tom is suffering through, and I think you've been getting some advice from people in our Discord.
Yeah, some people are offering help. I mean, I'm all for help as long as it's not like be better. Like if it's actual, like this game, what I'm finding about this game is that it's I find it quite obtuse in terms of like, there's so many things in menus. Like it tells you like I've suddenly got this dagger. This is the latest episode. It's really early on. You get this dagger lets you do something like adds, in common it's called enchantments or something, to weapons. But I've no idea. I've done it, but I have no idea how to use this thing. And if people can if that's obvious from watching, you're not doing this thing properly, just let me know, and that'd be helpful for sure.
Yeah. Yes, well, you can catch up with Tom's action there on the side. And there's also a review from Rebecca of Servants of the Lake, which is a super nice, nice looking. I haven't played it, but based on Rebecca's impressions, sounds very lovely, adventure puzzle, Phoenix Wright-y sort
Part
of
of a
thing.
big series as well. The review actually goes into quite a lot of detail about the whole thing, the whole long running series that's all connected. So it's quite
Yeah.
interesting to read
Yeah,
about all that stuff.
I like the art style. It looks nice. I'm probably gonna try that out after Gamescom, which I will talk about. I'll talk about the Gamescom plans next week because it'll be right before we go. Where the hell did that time go? And very quickly, as always, a little retrospective gander. This week we've got Fruit Ninja Kinect turns 15 years old, which I just remember that being being one of the only Kinect, right? I think of Kinect as the launch games and then Fruit Ninja, Fable, and shitty integration into games like Mass Effect and nothing else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember one game, Fruit Ninja, I do remember. I remember this game, I can't remember what it was called, but you used to put your arms in a position to build platforms for things. It was a bit like a Lemmings or something. You'd just stand there with your arms up like branches of a tree and these things would walk along you. Can't remember what it was called, but it was this is a game that I'm playing in my living room for some reason. But yeah, Kinect, funny. It was a funny time. I look back and actually think some of that stuff was quite fun though. Some of that,
Yeah.
even PlayStation Move. Me and my wife played PlayStation Move stuff quite a lot. Some of those games are quite fun. And all the buzz games, all that kind of stuff was all an era that's gone now. But you get some of it, it's different now. You get the Jackbox party games and stuff. They offer similar experiences, but not quite the same, I think. But yeah, it's an era that if I had to pick, I guess I'm glad that Kinect isn't still a thing, but it had its moments, I would say.
There was a horror game that Sega did.
Yeah,
Like a
bringing back
Kinect
memories.
exclusive horror game, something Nightmares. And such a weird concept, a Kinect exclusive horror game, because how are you going to be scared when you're doing all this? But nevertheless, I remember there was a good Disney music game as well. It was like a Dance Central style game. Of course, Dance Central, that's the other thing. God, how could I forget that?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Fruit Ninja Kinect, 15 years old. Pokemon Rumble Blast, 15 years old. Good spin-off. F-Zero is 35 and still no sign of it coming back. Hopefully, someone... feel like the best chances for F-Zero at the minute is someone at Universal deciding to put an F-Zero cameo in a film, and a bit like with Star Fox, light a fire under them. F-Zero being 35, however, means that also means that Pilot Wings must be 35. And Super Mario World must be 35. And the Super Nintendo itself. This is the 35th anniversary of the Super Nintendo hitting North America. Obviously, it and all those games have been out in Japan for a little bit longer. But, happy 35th to a console that I don't think is as good as the Mega Drive, but I do appreciate a great deal. And Super Mario World is, to this day, the best 2D Mario game. I will take I would accept no substitute on that front. I get the Mario free love, but it's World. It's always World. The Urge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII is 20 years old. One of the worst pieces of garbage I've ever experienced in my life. Just a terrible third-person shooter with a bad story, just a bad idea across the board. That was a game that was so rubbish, right? Years and years and years and years and years ago, Square Enix moved office in the UK, and they opened an old cupboard that hadn't been opened in years, and they found this cupboard was just stacked high with old games. And someone at Square messaged me, and I was RPG site, right? And they said, we found this massive cupboard. People in the office have taken what they want, and we're gonna put the rest in the trash. but we thought we'd see if you wanted it. So I was like, yeah, okay, just box me up, whatever, send it. And then they sent it all, and then we gave it all away on RPG Site over the course of about a year. And it was great because this was years after all this stuff had come out, but there were like limited edition Crisis Core PSPs, there were PS2 games, there were DS games, Wii games, all sealed, still in the shrink wrap. I think when they opened the cupboard, there were PS1 games in there, but they never made it so far as me. I think the people who worked at Square were pretty bloody quick on those ones, which fair enough, so will I be. But anyway, I digress. I gave all this stuff away, and the one thing I couldn't get rid of was copies of Dirge for Cerberus. Like, people literally did not want it. So I've still got about 25 copies of Dirge in my loft because I could not get rid of them, which tells you all you need to know about the quality of that game. And lastly, quick shout out to 99 Nights, which is 20 years old. Which, do you remember this being a big deal in the 360? Them making a big...
Is this the one with all the characters on screen, like the enemies, like loads and loads of them? Was it that one?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was this the game that they were like, where the guy got up at E3 and went 1 million troops.
Something like that, yeah. I remember it. I remember playing this, and I don't remember if it was any good or not. Like, I think it was okay. But yeah, I remember the big thing about all the on-screen enemies and stuff. Is it like a Dynasty Warriors type
It's
thing?
a Dynasty Warriors. It's a Dynasty Warriors alike, yes. I mean, the big thing was it's weird because like it was produced by Tetsuya Mizuguchi. So Mizuguchi is the Res guy and the Space Channel 5 guy. So it was produced by this truly legendary, but it's so unlike anything else that he has made. And I can't remember. Maybe it isn't the 1 Million Troops game because that was Tak Fuji.
I'm sure they made a deal about a big point about the amount of on-screen, the massive armies and stuff.
Sorry. So there's our answer. The 1 Million Troops game was 99 Nights 2. So it was the sequel. But I wanted to shout this out because this era of Xbox, man, when they were just giving Japanese publishers money and Japanese developers and publishing Japanese games that, they weren't going to set the world on fire, but they released a lot of like 7 and 8 out of 10s that were like great library fillers. Like, I've got fond memories of 99 Nights too. I wish Microsoft would do that again.
Wish any of them would do this again, where they actually put money into new, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Does it seem like it's happening?
Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, Dynasty Warriors is better than it's ever been, but it's like that doesn't mean that we can't have other games in that realm. But yeah, 20 years since 99 Nights, which, yeah, that was a game I think I don't think I probably bought it at launch. I think I probably got it for nothing. I'm looking around to see if I can see it on the shelf, but I can't. I bet it's still there though. But yeah, so that's 20 years old, which really tells me the heyday of Xbox was 20 years ago.
But it definitely was.
It's a fun note to end on. Yeah, so we're going to duck out now for this week. A bit of a shorter one this week, but it's a bit of a quiet week, really, isn't it? I guess everyone's got their powder dry. We're going to have some big episodes off the back of Gamescom based on what my schedule looks like, which we'll talk about a little bit more next week when I've actually reviewed what I can and can't talk about. Obviously, if you're a patron, stick around. In your feed, you will have the patron exclusive, or you can head to Patreon to get it. If you're not a patron, you can go to patreon.com/respectnet, RESPECNET, and you can sign up and you will get the lovely warm, fuzzy feeling inside from supporting independent games media in a week when we've had some nasty layoffs and stuff at other outlets. And hopefully we can, if you back us, we can use some of that money to give freelance to some of the people who are brilliant people who've been cut by short-sighted corporate dickheads. And if you can't afford that sound, you can visit our website at respect.net. Plenty of free content on there, on our YouTube channel. All the links to that are all on the site in the header, and our Discord server, where if you want to come and hang out or shout Elden Ring tips at Tom, totally possible. So yeah, that is it from us for this week, and we'll see you next week. Until next time, everyone. See ya.